Hey friends, it's Michele and welcome back to the show. We all know about the impact stress can have on our lives, and it can also impact our relationships. And that is what we're talking about today with the author of an amazing book called Till Stress Do Us Part: How to Heal the Number One Issue in Our Relationships. Joining us today is Elizabeth Earnshaw, who is a leading licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified Gottman therapist, clinical fellow of the LMFT, and the author of another book called I Want This to Work, an inclusive guide to navigating the most difficult relationship issues we face in the modern age. She's the founder of A Better Life Therapy and has a large following on Instagram who look forward to her inspiring and relatable content. If you're new to the podcast, I want to welcome you to the show. I'm Michele Lamoureux. I'm your host. I'm a certified life and holistic health coach and the author of a book called Design a Life You Love. And together we're going to be doing just that. Be sure to share today's episode with a friend. And on that note, let's get into the show. Here we go. Liz, till stress do us part. Till stress, where did you come up with that amazing title? And what does it mean? What does this mean?
Yeah, so I don't know where it came from, but it just came to me one day, like a long time ago. And I was like, I have to use that as a book title. And, it's kind of self-explanatory in the name that a lot of relationships are really negatively impacted by stress.
Yes.
Because we don't know how to navigate it well together, not because people are horrible people or anything like that, but
Yes.
that ends up being a huge cause of conflict and separation and divorce. And so it's often not really that death does us part. It's that all this other stuff in life does it first.
That's right. Well, I want to read something that you wrote in the beginning of the book, because I think it'll sort of set the tone for what we're talking about today. You write, every week, couples come into my office blaming their relationship issues for their stress, when in reality, their stress is often to blame for their relationship issues. Again and again, couples share that they are failing. There aren't enough hours in the day to lean in at work, practice attachment parenting, show up for their Peloton ride, and take the dog for a walk, let alone take time to connect with their partner. And then on the next page, you note just some statistics. You said, according to the American Psychological Association's 2022 Stress in America poll, Americans are more stressed than ever. So tell us about what is going on.
Yeah. So I think any of us just feel it naturally since 2020. There's been so many changes and so many things that come at people. And before that, there were already so many changes, but I feel like we're in such a rapid period of change, whether it's change about how relationships look versus maybe how they looked when you were growing up, what it looks like to parent versus how, what were the pressures of parenting when you were little or I was little versus what are the pressures of parenting now? Like, what are you up against as a parent now? What are the pressures that are coming just from society in general? Like with social media, I don't even think that we think about how much it impacts us, but we're watching things and we're starting to, in our brain, think that certain things are normal, like these perfectly beautiful homes and,
yes,
constant remodeling and constant perfect bodies and And we're seeing all of this as being like potentially attainable because we see it, but it's not really necessarily real life, that you can do all of that without stressing yourself out. So we've got like real social issues going on. There's more chronic illness. And then on top of it, we just have all of these pressures, financial pressures, the economy is impacted. And so I'm working with couples and they're coming in and they're just navigating all of this stuff at home.
Yeah.
And they want sometimes, and I understand it, but like a simplistic reason for why they're not getting along, which would be something like, if you just give us the tools to talk about this,
yes,
we'll be better. And sometimes it's really like, actually, your lives are kind of unmanageable or some really traumatic things have happened. And I think that that's playing a role. And we kind of have to talk about that, because I could teach you all day not to be critical, But if you're going home and you're both working 60 hours a week and have two little kids and can't make ends meet, you're going to fight with each other. That's just the reality.
Absolutely. And this idea of keeping up with the Joneses, which you do write in the book
Yeah.
about in the book, and social media where people are showing their highlight reels, which is not necessarily the reality behind their what's happening off screen. And
Yeah.
so people are creating added layers that you're right. Maybe our parents didn't have that. Is maybe what
No.
they saw the neighbors, the car the neighbors were driving, or what kind of renovations they might have been doing to their house, or, social comparison that way. But it wasn't an everyday bombardment of things
No.
that,
My mom was actually talking about that the other day. She was saying, you didn't have incredible disparity in what you were seeing. So, like your neighborhood usually was on par with like what you could attain.
yeah,
Maybe your neighbor had, the newer minivan, or your neighborhood had like a nicer landscaper or something, but it
yes,
wasn't like so far out of what was attainable. And you were only seeing the unattainable in a magazine or on like a TV show, and very rarely. So you kind of knew that those were things that were just kind of interesting to look at, or
yes.
fantasy or whatever. And now you're bombarded with it so much that you actually think it's the norm versus just that's an interior designer's home and that's beautiful to look at. And I appreciate the art and da 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 da. And I understand that like my house doesn't have to look like that. That's just the art of
Right.
it. And we are really like everyone is exposed to thinking that everybody is figuring out how to get all this stuff or do all of these things perfectly. And it's just not really real when you look around you.
Right. And I think it's important. And I just have to tell you how much I loved your book. I
Oh,
read
thank
it cover to
you.
cover. I loved hearing your personal stories. It was nice of you to be so vulnerable and to share, so relatable. And then your client situations I found so interesting. And I think also it becomes so relatable. And then you include the tools that you help them use that we're going to
Yeah.
talk more about today. But I think it's important to understand that there are different types of stressors. Like that was one of the big takeaways. So talk to us about how these different types of stressors show up. And there's even good stress, which I guess I forgot that
Yes.
there's good stress.
There's good stress. I mean, not
Yes.
all stress is bad. Stress actually keeps us moving.
Yes.
Um, so stress is anything that's challenging, that you feel tension having to deal with it, right? So it's a challenge to face. Doing a new exercise is a form of stress. Opening a business is a form of stress. Learning, if you're an artist, learning a new technique, it's a form of stress. It doesn't
Yes.
mean it's distressing, but it is stress. And so there's eustress, which
Yes.
is positive stress. We need it. It keeps us motivated. It makes us feel productive. It's something that we can look at and feel proud of ourselves once we've gotten over the hump. You've never done a yoga pose before. Your body feels the state of stress. You do it and you're like, yay, I did that. I feel good. Now I want to do more. And so good
Yes.
for you. And then there's distress, which is when you get to a point, it's kind of like the stress goes up a hill. And at a certain point, it's not positive, it's not productive, and it goes outside of your window of tolerance. And so
Mm.
you can't deal with it in a way that feels productive. It's just too much and it's distressing and it overcomes you and it changes your body state, it changes the way that you think, all sorts of things. So yeah, those are the two types of stress that we can feel. Some is good and some is not so good.
Yes. And when you say eustress, spell that for us because I'd never seen that word before.
Eustress.
Right, not YOU,
Yeah.
EU. Yeah, no, it's just funny because I'd never, until I read it in your book, I'd never actually heard that term before. So it's
Yeah.
eustress, the good stress. Um, so a lot of what we're talking about is related to some degree of how much we're taking on. And oftentimes women are taking on the lion's share of what's happening at home, which can
Yes.
ratchet up the stress. And then things come out sideways, for lack of a better way of saying it, right? We snap at
Yeah.
our partner, we get really irritable instead of saying, hey, there's a disparity here. I need help. So you talk to us about mental load. Would this
Mhm.
fall into mental load? And
Yes,
can you give us a story of how this might play out so somebody can get a visual of this?
absolutely. So we have physical tasks we have to do in life, and we have mental tasks that we have to do in life. Physical tasks would be physically vacuuming the floor. The mental task related to vacuuming is having to, first of all, notice that there is vacuuming that needs to be done, being able to remember where the vacuum cleaner is, if the vacuum cleaner needs new bags, going in, remembering that somebody's going to have to go get those bags, thinking about what time you're going to vacuum, all of those types of things. Those are the mental tasks. And so
Yes.
when it comes to relationships, unfortunately, people tend to not delegate really either of those things completely fairly. Women do tend to have more of the physical tasks as well. Men tend to have physical tasks that happen less frequently, and they do take like quote strength. So, carrying trash cans down or cutting the grass or putting mulch or something, but they happen less frequently. Women
Totally.
tend to have physical tasks that happen frequently, daily, are required to keep life going.
Yes.
But the most frustrating in relationships tends to be the mental tasks because they're invisible. So at
Yes.
least when you're doing physical tasks, you have somebody else saying, wow, the bedroom looks amazing or whatever it is. But when it's mental, no one is seeing the fact that your mind is always running. I was thinking about this yesterday. I was driving to the office
I don't know
and
what you're talking about, Liz.
yeah, you're probably like, oh my God, my mind never stops. Your
I
mind
know,
probably never
totally.
stops.
Totally.
So I was, and my husband's actually pretty good with this now, but I was driving to the office and I was like all over, like in the car, the red light would happen. And I was like, oh, while this red light happens, should I quickly text back the handyman because I have to tell him now what he has to do? Because if I don't get to him by this time, then I'm not going to get information from him about what he needs me to get at Home Depot so that I have it in time for my break where I can run to Home Depot. So I have to text it now. But also, I forgot to tell my husband that I'm having the handyman come Thursday. And oh my gosh, I didn't coordinate with my mom what time she's going to pick my son up on Thursday. And I hope she doesn't come when I need to run out to get stuff for this guy to meet him and blah, blah. So all of these thoughts about this one thing that's going to happen. This guy's coming for a couple hours to put up some wallpaper for me.
Yes.
But my mind, the entire 40-minute car ride was like a Tetris board. Where
Totally.
does all of these things fit? And now I have to delegate. So I'm delegating to my husband. Can you text my mom and tell her it'd be better if she comes at 9? And then he's like, well, but like if she comes at 9, do you remember that this happened? And then I'm like, oh, I didn't remember that. I have to call that person and tell them not to come anymore. So just so much mental load. That's what it looks like. And it
Yes.
is exhausting and it causes a lot of resentment in relationships if it's not delegated fairly.
Okay. You give an exercise, I believe, in the book. I mean, there's a way to sort of, can you just help us understand maybe how we can, A, you have to become aware and then B, communicate, right? So what can we do?
Yeah. So when you're trying to deal with a mental load, the most important thing is making it visible. And so something that I often ask people to do is to actually list out what is it? What are all of these things that are in your mind? I also ask them to do the physical stuff too. Like, what are all the tasks? What are you each doing? And then to look at those together so that first of all, you're able to say, oh my gosh, there is so much stuff. And then to really assign who's taking care of those things, because sometimes we need
Yes.
to make that visible. I had an experience with my husband where a therapist asked us to write things down once. And it was a good visual for my husband to be able to see like, oh my God, there's a lot on your plate. There's a lot that you're doing. And then to
Yes.
work together to redistribute, where do these things go? What are we going to do with all of these mental load tasks that we have? Who's going to be responsible really from start to finish? And I often recommend that people listen to or read Eve Rodsky's book, Fair Play, because that talks a lot about the mental load. And she even has a set of game cards that couples can use. Um, that each card has a task that people have to deal with in family life.
Yes.
And you distribute those. But really, it's making it visible and it's figuring out how do we fairly distribute this.
Yeah. But you said something important. You said not just that the toilet paper, for example, needs to be replaced, but that not just the mom, somebody else is noticing that the toilet paper needs to be replaced. I have a friend who during COVID, when she had hit hard when it first came out, and she'd been, in bed for a week. And when she came out, the house was just, it's just a
A
disaster.
disaster.
And she's like, they were all, perfectly comfortable, the kids, her husband living like that. And she was like,
Yeah.
come on, like
I do all
now.
this work, but it didn't matter.
Yeah. And so she's sick for a week and it was like a disaster. So, how do you get somebody on board if they're not, they don't care as much? Because is that sort of, I don't know if that would be a values thing or where does that sort of fall into priorities? Maybe it's a priority.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Sometimes you'll have a partner that's like, but I would be okay with it if the wallpaper didn't get hung on Thursday. Using my example, right? Like if I
Yeah.
came home and said to my husband, oh my gosh, I just had to deal with so much stuff on my own. And I wish you would have navigated some of it. He would have said, you're the one who wanted the wallpaper hung up. Like we don't need we don't need that to happen.
Right.
And one thing I talk to couples about a lot is like some of that is true, right? You want to talk together about like how much are you overextending yourself? Sometimes there's an ideal, right? And we want to reach that ideal. We want the perfect, beautiful house. We want our kids to get a Montessori education. I don't know. I'm thinking of all these things. We want a perfect body. We want to exercise every single day. And then sometimes there's the reality of our lives. And something that I have couples talk about is like, what's the reality versus the ideal? And so something that I want couples to be able to do is sometimes to say, you know what, you're right. I did kind of create this issue in our family. Like maybe we don't need wallpaper this week when things are super, super busy. And I could choose to do that later. Maybe I didn't need to spend all this money that we then had to think about how to like move stuff around. That's true. So some things can be, and I talk about like shedding, some things we can say, like, this doesn't need to be on our load. But there's other things where I think the partner will say, well, we don't really need that, but they don't actually mean it.
Hmm.
And with your friend's case, like, yeah, they were fine for a week living that way, but that isn't the whole picture of life, right? That's like mom's sick. So who cares if the house is messy and we eat fast food all week? But if that continued on, and this is what I would probably say to the partner, play that out for me. Play out the video of how that will look. And then is that actually where you want to end up? Because the video of that would be like, well, the kids eat really unhealthy food all the time. The house is really messy. And like, while that doesn't bother us day to day, what it would mean over time is that it actually becomes dilapidated because we can't see that the wall has a hole in it or whatever, things aren't being taken care of. The kids end up being stressed out because their clothes aren't clean for school. And so then our mornings are really bad. And so one thing that I often, and this is difficult if you don't have a partner that's like willingly entering this conversation with you, sometimes you need that third party.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, really? And you could say this to your partner, like, okay, play the videotape out for me. Like, you're saying you don't mind. You're saying that I'm bringing this all onto myself and I'm making life stressful and the house is fine the way it is. But like, if I don't do these things, what will that look like in a month, in 2 months? And your partner might not actually see that picture. They might be like, I don't know. I mean, the house is fine. Da, da, da. You might have to tell them, look, this is what will happen. If this continues, if the reason I keep the laundry up is because I know when we don't have outfits in the morning for the kids, we get to school late. And when we get to school late, I end up late for work. And then when I'm late for work, I'm in a bad mood. And then when I'm in a bad mood, and so, yes, I understand day to day, who cares? But this is what will happen if it doesn't. And so I need you to be on the same page with me
Yes.
about how we're going to navigate the household proactively so that we don't get there and in a way that doesn't put all the stress on me.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love it. Well, let me ask you, have you changed the way you practice? Like, was stress always a focal point of how you worked with couples? Or is it, you're shaking your head?
No. Oh, sorry. No,
Oh, no,
I
I'm
have
just,
changed the way I practice.
yeah. And I'm wondering with 50, what is the stat? 50% of marriages end in divorce. If there's a disconnect where people think, I'm just paraphrasing kind of from what I
Yeah.
understood from your book. So you correct it, but if we're thinking, oh, you know, my husband is a poor communicator because he grew up with parents that were bad communicators and he never learned it, or, they just an overspender and we're never going to get on this same page or whatever it is. And it's creating all this stress. The stress is the issue, but they're thinking the problem is the spending or the lack of communication or other things, right? Tell us more. And then how people should be thinking about this, because I'm sure there are people in couples counseling and maybe they're putting a lot of band-aids on and not really getting to the heart of it.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, I've changed the way I've practiced. I in the beginning, I was very much tool based. Like, let's do this speaking and listening exercise. And this is complex. Of course, I still do that. Of course, it's still a problem if your partner is spending money that you didn't agree on. Like, those are problems, sure. But what was happening is they would get these tools. I would teach them how to be speaker and listener. I would teach them how to have better intimacy. I would give them all the tools and they wouldn't improve. And they would come back and say, well, we still got in this huge blowout argument. It was great for 3 days. And then on Wednesday, my husband came home and he had a grouchy face on. And like, I don't understand why he has to come in that way. And then I yelled at him and I just, da 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 da. We're so sick of this. Or, well, we tried the things you said about sex, but it's not working because I don't want to have sex, like da 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 da. And not only what's happening at home, but in the room, they would keep coming back and they'd get into arguments in the room. And I'm sitting there saying, well, like, let's just listen to each other. Can you just try to have this conversation? Can we try to come up with a solution? And it just couldn't happen because what they were experiencing was either chronic stress at home, which means that their body is under chronic stress. They're experiencing cortisol levels in their body, adrenaline levels in their body, all sorts of things that physiologically make it very difficult to do any of the things I'm trying to teach them. When you're in physiological distress, you're in a threat state. So, and I'm telling you that you're supposed to listen to somebody when you're in a threat state or show affection or laugh or play or have sex. Like, not going to do it because you wouldn't do those things if you were being chased by someone mugging you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You would be protecting yourself. And so what's happening is they're at home and they go into very self-protective modes because their bodies are so physiologically dysregulated, and it becomes the reaction becomes quicker and quicker over time. So, when we're first together, my husband comes in grumpy after work. What do I say? I say, oh no, what happened today? Like, are you okay? Was your boss a jerk again?
Yeah.
And we're fine. But after we've also had a new baby, after I'm stressed at work, after I feel frustrated because of something an in-law said to me, whatever it is, all of these things are putting me in a stress state. So now he comes home and he looks grumpy and I say to him, what's your problem? Why do you have to come
Don't bring all that negative energy in my space.
Don't bring that in here. I was in a good mood. It's like, I wasn't really in a good mood.
You walked in, right? Yeah.
If I was in a good mood, my response wouldn't have been, I'm in a good mood.
I love it.
But so, like, of course, I know all these things.
Yes.
I know I'm supposed to say, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? But I'm not in a good mood because I'm stressed out. And so I can't do the things that I'm being told. And then in the room, I'm seeing couples like yelling at each other, zoning out, saying things they don't mean. And it's like, well, their body is distressed. Yes. And so I've changed the way I practice because I deal with the distress first, or at least alongside what's happening.
The issues. I love it. I love it. There was a couple in the book you talk about. I don't remember, maybe it was Joel or something. It doesn't really matter the name, but in the scenario, he's so angry, and what is it? His heart rate is going up. So if it hits, it's over, what is it? 100 beats per minute?
100 beats per minute.
You're like, the brain's offline. He can literally physically not take in any information. You send the wife to get some coffees and calm her separately, and you go calm yourself, if you got a little triggered, right? And then once he had that time to regulate, he was able to take that in. So that must happen all the time to couples where that one of them maybe both, or hitting that tipping
Yeah.
point where they literally, what did you say in the book you write? When you're stressed, we become myopic. Like we just can't
Mhm.
even, right? We can't even take in anything.
Yes, we can't. And that's actually a physiological reality. So sometimes what's happening between couples is they're seeing each other's behavior as being conscious. So then they get more dug in. Like, why don't you just listen to me? Why can't you talk about things? Why are you always yelling? Da 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 da. Da. And with that, there's this underlying belief of you should just change this behavior because you know you shouldn't do it. And the
Right.
reality is that yeah, there's a small population of people who are awful people who choose to yell even though they're regulated. I'm sure they're out there. I've seen a few, but
Yes.
most people, if they could choose not to scream at somebody when they're upset, they would not scream. If they could choose not to go too far in the mean words they say, they wouldn't do it. If they
Yeah.
could choose to not go hide in the basement and play video games to talk to you, they wouldn't do it. But what's happening is their body is having this physiological response.
Hmm.
And the physiological response is completely wrapped around keeping yourself safe. And when you need to be safe, you're focused on one thing, you're myopic. Focused on the one thing is I need to not let myself be vulnerable and I need to protect myself.
Yes.
And there's three ways that people do that. They either fight to protect themselves.
Is
So
that the
you might be
cobra? Is that what you
the
call it?
cobra, you might
Yeah.
be the cobra in the relationship. That's used to be me. I actually don't really do that anymore.
Hmm.
But when I get my nastiest self, I'm the cobra. And I'm very much like, I snap and I have
Look
venom and
out. Liz is
I can
mad.
say the thing
Yeah.
and I can yell and I can, say things that are not nice. I've worked very hard to regulate myself, but
Yes.
some people go into fight mode. Some people are like, I call them the fleeing deer. So they're the ones that are like, I'm done. In couples therapy, they're the ones that are like, I'm done with this relationship. And I don't know why we're in couples therapy, or they walk out of the room.
They're
They're
so
so
overwhelmed that that's it. I got to get
that's it.
out.
And
Yeah.
their partner's overwhelmed and their partner's screaming, if you don't effing get back in this room right now,
Cobra.
da, da, da,
Yeah.
da, they're being the cobra.
Mm.
There's also a possum. They just freeze and play dead. And so this is somebody in couples therapy who somebody's pouring their heart out and it's beautiful what they're saying. And their partner is like a dead body. Like they're not responding, they're looking away, they aren't showing any care towards that person at home. That looks like someone who they sneak down to the basement all night
Is that
and they're
also stonewalling? I didn't mean to interrupt. Is that also
stonewalling.
stonewalling where
Yep.
they just like ignore them and like be in the same room, but not give any energetic connection?
No energetic connection. It might be someone you've texted really important thing, something to, and they just don't write you back. And then they come home. And it's not because they're like busy. They come home, they're like, yeah, I don't have anything to say about that. Right. They're not saying, I'm leaving, I'm done. They're like, I don't have anything to say. Or
They
I don't
opt
know,
out completely. They're just
I'm
checked out.
opting out.
Yeah.
This is all happening because they're physiologically overwhelmed. And likely, if you looked at your Apple Watch or a pulse oximeter or whatever, you would see that their heart rate is up from what it
Mm.
usually is. And so their focus is I have to protect myself and I have to get what I need, not what you need. I can't look at you anymore. I don't see you anymore. I'm not
Yeah.
curious about you anymore. I don't know what you need. I don't care what you need because I'm being chased by a lion and I don't want to be eaten by the lion. So I'm going to play dead. I'm going to run away or I'm going to fight the lion. And unfortunately, you're the lion right now.
Yeah.
And so it becomes impossible to get through that unless you actually know what's going on.
Hmm. Oh my God, this is so good. We'll talk about, you mentioned the word regulation. We were talking before the mics went on about a scene that you talk about in the hospital. Your baby's not doing well. His eyes roll back in his head. You're thinking, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my boy." And a nurse comes in and says, "He's going to be okay, Mama." And you and your husband hold each other and you co-regulate. So there's co-regulation and then there's also self-regulation. You said that this is essential because without it, and I don't know if it's one or the other, that's the essential piece. I'd love to understand this more, but it
Yeah.
seems like you have to get to that place or there's going to be zero communication and zero ability to move forward.
Yes. So in our stressful lives, we need
Yes.
in a relationship, and if we want a strong relationship, we need both. You could technically just always self-regulate yourself, but like when you're with another person, this isn't just a partner, your child, whatever. There's going to be moments where that person gets dysregulated. You have the capacity to be regulated and you can help them, right?
Mm,
So self-regulation is the ability to recognize I'm in distress and I'm going to calm myself down,
yeah.
whatever that takes.
Yeah.
And I talk in the book about different things you can do, but it might be breathing. It might be that you have to take a walk. It might be asking for help. There's a lot of things, but you have to learn, how do I recognize that I'm getting dysregulated? I'm getting to the place where I might become the cobra, the deer, or the possum. And instead of going there, I can calm my body down.
Mm,
Co-regulation is when you can use your self-regulation to help someone when they've gotten outside of their window of tolerance and their own work isn't working, right? And
yeah.
so when you can say, the example I gave earlier, like if my husband came in the door with a grouchy face, my job would be to self-regulate and co-regulate, right? So
Yes.
first, to be able to say, well, I'm not in as bad of a place as he is right now. Whew, let me not, I can tell I'm getting agitated. Let me take a breath. Let me walk to the other room for 5 seconds and get my mind in a different place for him. And then the other piece would be, I say something to him that makes him know he's safe.
Mm,
Co-regulation is all about reminding the other person's nervous system that it's safe.
yeah.
And I can do that with a calm voice. I can do that with a hug. I can do that by being curious, because those are things that do not happen if you're not safe, you're not getting a hug, you're
No.
not having a conversation, people around you don't have a calm voice. And so he comes in with the grouchy face. I feel cool enough that I'm able to say, hey, can I just give you a hug? Or it's like it was a bad day. Do you need a second? Or hey, what happened? Everything okay? Any of those things. Or maybe I don't say anything at all, but I rub his back and I say, hey, babe, I'm going to go in the kitchen and make dinner. Come in when you want to see me, whatever. But any of those things, they're telling this person's brain and this
Yes.
person's nervous system, you're safe with me. And like,
Yes.
it's okay. We're here for each other. And we can feel that with another person. We can feel calmer in the presence of another person. So in relationships, if one person can do that in an upsetting moment, it's really powerful.
Totally. And I think probably anyone listening who's received that knows in that moment how you can just get that, you're able to take that breath and not feel alone. And it's what
Yeah.
moms do with their babies, isn't it? Or our kids, if
It
they hurt
is.
themselves, we scoop them up and give them that
We
hug until they can calm and come back and be
Yes,
present.
we
Yeah,
calm ourselves down. And like sometimes we don't, and then we see what happens, right? That's
true.
actually, kids is such a good example because, you know, and I'll admit this, like nobody's a perfect mom, right?
Totally.
So
Totally.
there's times where my son does something and let's say it turns out not so great and I told him not to do it. And my response, like last night, I told him it's time for bed. He gets up to go get a snack and he runs down the hallway and he falls and he hurts
Mm-hmm.
his knee.
Mm-hmm.
And last night, for some reason, I was really regulated and I said to him, oh my goodness, what happened to your knee? Give me a hug, like, let me see it. Okay, come here. It's all right. Like, let's go back up to bed. But let's say it was 2 nights ago when I was really tired and I had no more self-regulation in me. My response might have been like, well, what did you think was going to happen? You're supposed to be in bed right now. And now I have to deal with this. And
Totally.
the first response, he stops crying, he gets back up to bed, I maybe get him a glass of water. The second response has now created a 45-minute scenario where he's
Totally.
like, you're so mean to me. I just wanted water and I have a broken knee.
Totally.
And so
Totally.
when you think about it, you know that it works better to be calm. It doesn't always work. You're not always going to be calm, but it has a lot of power to do it.
Yes. I love the example you get. And it's, again, so relatable. What if somebody's carrying a lot of trauma from their past?
Hmm.
How do they unburden themselves so that they can be present?
Hmm.
Because, some of that stuff comes through, it's not intentional. It's like a
Yeah.
habitual thing. Like if they've been on, I don't know, if they were
Well, if
dysregulated for a
you're
long time.
traumatized and you're
Yeah.
used to, let's say you grew up in a home where somebody's always like screaming at you and your body has this habitual protective response of like shutting down.
Yeah.
And so your partner isn't screaming at you, but your partner is upset about something and they deserve to be heard. But your natural response to that from your trauma is like, I can't talk about this. And it's not really because you're scared of your partner. It's not really because your partner is doing anything wrong, but whatever's happening is reminding your body of that experience. And
Yes.
that's so hard. And I think what comes into play here is we really have to know each other. So you have to understand my partner was screamed at as a child in a very scary way. And so when I get upset and have a loud voice, even if it's reasonable to
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
you say, I grew up in like an Italian family and everybody yelled and it wasn't a big deal. It doesn't scare me,
Yeah.
but if it is upsetting to them, then the partner needs to be aware of how they approach issues,
Yeah.
right? They need to work on their own self-regulation and making
Yeah.
sure they're presenting things from a regulated place, which in every relationship is going to be better anyway, but especially if you know your partner struggles. And then the other person, even though they experience that trauma, it's important they have awareness that it keeps getting triggered even in moments that aren't dangerous.
Yes.
And this isn't going to be functional for my life. And so, what can I do to navigate this? Do I need to get some EMDR therapy? Do I need to learn what to do in the moment when I hear the loud voice, but it's not yelling? Like, can I start to learn to say to myself, that's just a loud voice. It's just a loud voice. Like,
Interesting.
do I, to prevent my shutdown, do I say to my partner, like, whenever you're upset, it's better for me if you tell me by text, because when you say it, I shut down and I have to leave. I need to simmer on things. So you might have to compromise with the other person. But again, it plays back into that role of you both need to learn some self-regulation and you both
Yes.
need to work on co-regulation with the understanding that sometimes you do have a partner that's going to have a harder time.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. And because you know they're having a harder time, you have to be particularly aware and
Yes.
particularly gentle with them and patient with them and supportive. Um, but the thing we know about trauma is that the more supportive and empathic a relationship and safe a relationship, the traumatic responses, they can be healed through that.
It's
So
beautiful. Yeah.
like if your partner's used to being screamed at and then they learn from you, honey, when I'm mad at you, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm going to still hug. We're going to still hug. We're going to come
Right.
to, and over time, their nervous system is going to be like, this is a safe person. Not every person who gets upset is going to hit me or kick me out of the house or whatever. Um, and so over time, the ability to deal with that together can really be very healing and impactful.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, Liz, the book has so many amazing tools. Are there any that are like your favorite, or I don't want to say the most impactful, but something that helps people create more awareness and start identifying the stressors that they can play with? I love giving actionable things on the
Yeah,
show.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of tools. The one that I end with is asking people to identify 3 different baskets. And so this is really thinking about the way that stress spills over into your life and how can you begin to organize those in your mind. I think so much about stress is chaotic. So we want to get organized. And the 3 baskets are shedding, prevention, and adapting. And what you do first is sit down individually or together and just make a list, like we talked about. Like, here's all of the stressors we have. It could be tasks, but it could also be stressors. Like a parent is dying, right? That's a stressor. They're very sick and this is upsetting. Dealing with an estate after the parent died, that's a task. One of us is sick. Our kid is struggling in school. Like any stressors, write them down, big and small. We have to deal with grocery shopping every week and nobody ever knows who does it. And then I want you to go through that list and think, which of these can we shed? So things that we can shed are the things in our life that we really don't need to be taking on. And if we really sat down and got real with ourselves, we would recognize that it's bringing more stress into our life than any benefit that it's bringing into our life. So some of these things might be stuff that you have to delegate. Like you're going to still cut your grass, but maybe you get somebody to cut your grass. Some of these things might be things where you recognize this is just about more, more, more. Like I don't actually need to get the bathroom redone right now. We have an infant. I'm going to lose my mind why am I doing that?
Right.
Let's get rid of that.
Yes.
Some of it, they're complicated things that are going to take longer. And so it doesn't mean you're going to shut it tomorrow, but it might be this job I have, it needs to go. You know, I talk with a lot of lawyers, actually.
I worked in a law firm. In marketing, though, I wasn't an attorney. But yes.
You know, and I have a lot of lawyers.
Yeah.
Their marriages are all failing. If you're a lawyer and your marriage is struggling, it's probably because of your job. And I have to say to them, I'm so sorry this is hard for you to hear because I know that it's your career and I know you're making a lot of money, but working in big law is killing your marriage because you're taking your laptop with you to a baptism of your child and then like being forced to go take a phone call while the child's being baptized. Like, I'm not saying you need to quit your job tomorrow, but you actually might need to get like an in-house position somewhere that's 9 to 5 or maybe you have to set the boundaries and risk being fired. I don't know, but some shedding things are really hard.
Yeah.
Like you might get in trouble. You might get fired. You might make less money. You might spend more money, whatever it is, but you have to look at them and say, what do we need to remove so that we can have a better life? The second thing is look at that list. What is preventable? And so I kind of talked about a preventable thing earlier when I said, you know, the partner might be like, it's fine if we don't do the laundry every day, but it's like, yeah, until Monday morning when everybody's fighting because they can't find their clothes.
Yeah.
And so while day to day, it might feel fine that we don't put things where they go. A huge stressor in our life is our mornings before school. How do we prevent that being a stressor? Maybe we have breakfast ready to go, or maybe we don't make it so complicated and we let ourselves microwave waffles instead of cooking. Maybe we only have 5 outfits for the kids and that's it. We're not going to do 8 million outfits of laundry.
Yes.
Here's the things we can prevent. And then finally, it's adapting. And these are the stressors on that list. You can't get rid of them. You can't prevent them. They are unfairly happening to you because life can suck sometimes. And what can you do to learn skills to adapt together? And some of that is like even just recognizing it. This is really hard that your mom has to go into assisted living. We can't change that. We're responsible for finding her a place. It's very stressful for us. It's expensive. This is just our life right now. But what do we do to be on the same page about it? How do we support each other? How do we get help? How do we regulate? How do we complete the stress cycle? When you do that, what you should find is that then you can focus on the things you need to adapt to, because the other things over time, this isn't going to happen in a day, but over time in your life, you've gotten systems in place to prevent a lot of the issues. And you're also being good at not bringing issues into your life so that you're ready and you're prepared for the stuff that you don't get to decide on.
Absolutely.
So, anyway, make a list, think about what you can shed, think about what you can work on preventing, and then the other things you're going to have to adapt to. And you can learn how to do that by stress management skills and all sorts of stuff.
I love it. And people can pick up the book, Till Stress Do Us Part, How to Heal the Number One Issue in Our Relationships by Elizabeth Earnshaw. There's so many great, I earmarked so many of these exercises. Absolutely love them.
Oh.
Where can people find the book, you online? Where should I direct them?
Yeah, so you can find the book anywhere books are sold. It'll be available. It's for pre-order now, and then September 9th, it comes out in the actual store. If you want to find me online, you can find me on Instagram at Liz Listens, or my website, which is elizabethernshaw.com.
Love it. Thank you. This is the third time you've been on the show. I love connecting with you, Liz. You're phenomenal. All the work you put out, I love so much. Ladies, share this with all of your friends. All of the show notes will be over at thegoodlifecoach.com, and on your podcast players, you can find Liz's book and her handles right on your phone where you're listening. And definitely do share it with a friend. Liz, thank you so much, and happy birthday to your girl.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on for a third time.
Yeah, no, this is great. I know, it's so nice to see you. It's always such a pleasure. And thank you again. This book is phenomenal. Till Stress Do Us Part. Ladies, go pick up your copy. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thank you. It was good to see you.
You too. Thank you. Hey, friend, I have one request before we sign off today. If you've gained any value from any of the interviews that you've tuned into, would you take just 1 minute and leave a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts? It's actually how more women can find the show, and I want to continue growing a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you for all of your support, and I look forward to being back with you next week. Bye for now.
This podcast is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any information provided is not intended to be a substitute for medical, mental health, or other professional advice. Seek out your trusted healthcare provider or other qualified professional for all matters dealing with your health and well-being. Any opinions or information provided by a guest are their own and not those of Michele Lamoureux or the company.